Good morning. Welcome to another episode of um, Soulful Contemplations, where we're going to read from the poetry of Rumi, and one of our favorite poets here. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me. And let's see what we've got for today. All right. Give me a second. Right. Okay. The poem we have today is called Emptiness. And emptiness is something that I think a lot of us can relate to when we feel empty inside, when we feel things are meaningless, when we feel disconnected. And there's a feeling of emptiness. And perhaps it is the one thing I think that drives us in our lives, this feeling of emptiness, more than perhaps anything else. So let's read what Rumi has to say about it, and then we'll delve into it and contemplate it and see where we go with it. No idea where we're going to land up. So, yeah, just to kind of remind you, we're doing this every Monday at 9:30, talking about reading from the poetry of Rumi and contemplating his words. So Rumi writes here in this poem, consider the difference in our actions and God's actions. We often ask, why did you do that? Or why did I act like that? We do act, and yet everything we do is God's creative action. Okay. We look back and analyze the events of our lives, but there is another way of seeing, a backward and forward at once vision that is not rationally attainable or understandable. Okay, you'll notice right away that Rumi's style of writing is something that befuddles the mind often. It has us slow down. It has us think. It has us go within and try to find a deeper understanding of what is it that he's trying to say. So bear with me as we do that. All right, let's start from the beginning. Consider the difference in our actions and God's actions. So some of you who grew up with an idea of God being some controlling, we all have these notions of what God is, and some think there is no God. To say there is no God or to say there is God is pretty much the same thing, in my opinion. Don't deny something that doesn't in fact exist, and you don't, have a strong belief about that. I don't know anybody who has a strong belief about the non-existence of Santa Claus, but atheists, oh yeah, they're pretty adamant in their beliefs. All right, so consider the difference in our actions and God's actions. We often ask, why did you do that? Or why did I act like that? Have you noticed that we do that? I think there's a great truth here. We're constantly analyzing our actions and the actions of others. What does it mean? Why did he do that? Why did I do that? What is wrong with me? How could I possibly have done that? Or how could you possibly have done that? Why would you ever do that? I would never do that. We have so many such thoughts, so many ways in which we try to analyze the world and to understand it and to make sense of it. And in the process, our minds are worrying. And I mean whirring, WHIRRING, whirring like that, like a computer, like a machine spinning around and round and round with these thoughts. So Rumi goes on to say, we do act, and yet everything we do is God's creative action. So it's very confusing sometimes. A lot of people think that either everything is done by God, and God is therefore a puppet master who controls everyone. Have you ever heard the saying, if bad things are happening then in this world, then what kind of God would let bad things happen? Right? Well, the assumption is that God, in fact, is doing everything. It's taken literally like that. It's that God, in fact, is allowing everything. God, in fact, is responsible for everything. And if you were to go by that assumption that God does everything, well, then we do nothing. And if we do nothing, then why the heck are we responsible for what we do? Why do we go to jail? Why do we have bad karma? And why do we go into some, whatever people think of, heaven or hell, right? If we're not responsible for our actions, if God is, right? So obviously that is not a true statement because there are enough contradictory statements to that. Certainly, we're doing what we're doing. Well, so what does it mean that not a blade of grass moves without the will of God? Or as Rumi says, we do act, and yet everything we do is God's creative action. It's you see, it seems like a conundrum, like it seems like something very confusing. Why is he saying that, in fact? So as I understand it, what he's trying to what is meant by all those statements is that this energy, this world, this possibility that we are, is allowed to do whatever it wants to do. It has free will. It has the ability to act freely. Although this energy and this creation is by some divine force that we call God, and although this divine force creates us in certain ways, yet we have absolute and utter freedom to do whatever we wish and face the consequences, of course. That's the trick, right? Of course, if there was no consequences, then we'd probably just be just about doing anything we felt like. So there has to be some kind of thing. People often misunderstand the idea of karma and think it's a biblical version of punishment of some sort. No, 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 not at all. It's actually more of showing you a mirror into what you're doing. In other words, what you've done is what you get to experience. What you do to another is what you get to experience for yourself. That's the intention behind karma, so that we learn from our misdeeds, and we learn to rectify ourselves and better ourselves. We learn to reflect, but not by judging us or punishing us, simply by showing us the mirror. You hit someone, they will hit you back. It's as simple as that. And sometimes that karma can come back immediately, like in the case of hitting someone, or it may come back over a period of time, or after many lifetimes, perhaps. All right, so we do act, and yet everything we do is God's creative action. So that means when God's creative action means it's that possibility, the space that God has opened up. We look back and analyze the events of our lives, but there is another way of seeing, a backward and forward at once vision that is not rationally understandable. So there is another way of seeing, right? That's what he's saying. A backward and forward at once vision. I'm going to have to read further to understand what he's trying to say here. It's not immediately clear. Only God can understand it. Satan made the excuse. You caused me to fall. Whereas Adam said to God, we did this to ourselves. After this repentance, God asked Adam, since all is within my foreknowledge, why didn't you defend yourself with that reason? Adam answered, I was afraid and I wanted to be reverent. So he's pointing out here something very tied in with the Abrahamic religions. They all have the same thing. Rumi comes from the Sufi tradition. And in the Sufi tradition, you'll find that there's a lot of similarity with Christianity. In fact, the same basic ideas are there. So if we go back to the analogy here, when Satan falls from grace, right, he blames God. You caused me to fall. And when Adam falls from grace, Adam says, we did this to ourselves. This is something, I never thought of this before. This is something brilliant. After this repentance, God asked him, well, why didn't you blame me? Since you know that everything is in my foreknowledge, why didn't you defend yourself with that reason? Why didn't you just go out and say, God, you caused me to fall. You made this happen. You knew everything that was going to happen. Why didn't you not stop me? Why, since you didn't stop me, then it's your fault. You caused me to fall, as Satan said. But Adam answered, I was afraid and I wanted to be reverent. Now you'll wonder, what the heck has this relevance with my life? And it has everything. This is the essence of everything. This is the essence of our relationships. This is the essence of everything. So hold in there. And I'm just starting to see where he's going. Then Rumi continues. He says, whoever acts with respect will get respect. Whoever brings sweetness will be served almond cake. Okay. I am just really excited about this one. You see, in our lives, we tend to do the same thing. We tend to blame others when things don't go out the way we want. We tend to accuse them, we tend to blame them, we tend to find fault with them, and we tend to not want to own or take responsibility because that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to take responsibility for what you've done, what might have hurt another. And even though you may think that what you did was correct, still, if you now have to turn around and look at what you did that maybe wasn't correct through the eyes of another human being or another person or God, then suddenly you have to reverse engineer your thinking. That's what he means here when he says that it's a backward and forward at once vision that is not rationally understandable. Hula. A backward and forward at once vision. Can you look at something backward and forward at the same time? Can you move backward and forward at the same time? To do so would mean to become still. In fact, that's the answer. You will not be able to understand the view of, so right now, let me break it down. If I have a certain view and I think that something is, let's say this mouse here, I say to you, this is a mouse, and you say to me, no, it's a hockey puck, right? It's something that's used in the game of hockey. And you're like, you're completely convinced about that, and I'm completely convinced about this, and we're having an argument. Now, this could be, of course, anything we disagree on, right? And these days, there's so much of disagreement about so many things. But you and I are holding opposite views, and we argue and we fight, and we might even stop talking to each other, and we might become bitter enemies, and we might end up having nothing to do with each other because I hate you, and how could you say that this is something? You are mad, you are crazy, you are stupid, right? We could have all this drama going on. But if you're still, and in that stillness, you look at both the object and its reflection. So think of water, and there is the reflection in the water. There is what I think, and there is the reflection, what you think. There is my version of reality, and there is your version of reality. And if I can stop and look at both simultaneously, then I suddenly see things the way God sees things. That is the point he's making. When we are in the throes of our mind, when we are in the throes of our thinking and our intellect, right, and our rationality, then we see things linearly. We see things in one way. And therefore we become adamant, and therefore we become rigid, and we become fanatical even. But when you can see both sides of the coin, when you can see all sides of a situation, then you develop that vision, that ability to be able to see as God does. That's the point he's making here. When Satan falls from grace, according to the poem here, he says to God, you caused me to fall. That is blame. And that is that blame that he's sitting in, and therefore the hate that arises out of that, and therefore the animosity and the anger and the turning that into vengeance against all creation. Right? That's what Satan does. Whereas Adam goes into a place of humility, and he says, we did this to ourselves. Humility is the power, is the weapon that causes us to enter stillness. From humility comes silence. Once I go into a place of humility is not about saying it's all my fault. It's not about saying it's all your fault. It's simply coming into a place of silence, into a place of nothingness, into a place of emptiness, right? And from where we can actually view both sides of a situation and ultimately realize that it's not about right and wrong. It's not about I'm right, you're wrong, or who's more right or who's more wrong, but rather it's about emptiness, meaning the dissolution of the ego. It was the ego that in the first place thought this was right. It was the ego in the first place that thought this is wrong. The ego that disagreed with you, the ego that fought with you. And when I dissolve that ego into that place of emptiness, now I'm able to see you and I'm able to see what you're trying to say to me. And now we're able to actually connect and communicate. We're able to see with the same eye. It's a beautiful thing that he's referring to here. So he says, whoever acts with respect will get respect. People say, I want to be respected. I want to be loved. I want people to appreciate me. I want people to value me. I want you to validate me. Well, it's not a one-way street, my dear. It's a two-way street. Whoever acts with respect will get respect. So when we are respectful of others, when we listen to others, when we care about others, then we're going to get that back sooner or later, or from somewhere or other, even if not from the person concerned, if they're too stuck and adamant in their way. Whoever brings sweetness will be served almond cake. Whoever brings sweetness, ask yourself, how often do you bring sweetness into the lives of those around you? How often do you bring sweetness into your own life? Right? The only way we try to go about getting sweetness is by eating sweet things. Hey, give yourself a break. That's not the only way to get sweetness. Act from sweetness. This thing has been completely misunderstood. Sweetness has been belittled and looked down upon. Aggressiveness has been made to be the ruler of the land, and and control, and being able to be, and powerful and rich and famous and all of that stuff. That's what we look up to. But really, humility, sweetness, these are the qualities that Rumi is talking about here. These are the things that melt the heart of God. These are the things that melt our hearts as we communicate and love each other. So he says, whoever brings sweetness will be served almond cake. Good women are drawn to be with good men. Of course, the question arises, what then is good? What is a good man? What is a good woman? But honor your friend or treat him rudely and see what happens. He's talking about action and reaction. Honor your friend and treat him rudely. See what happens. Love, tell an incident now that will clarify this mystery of how we act freely and are yet compelled. One hand shakes with palsy, another shakes because you slapped it away. One hand shakes with palsy. So imagine a person whose hand is shaking with arthritis. I think they used to call it palsy earlier, or some form of dementia. So let's take arthritis. So your hand is shaking, and the other one slaps it away. Stop, stop. Like that. An act of violence against yourself. Another hand shakes because you slapped it away. Love, tell an incident now that will clarify this mystery of how we act freely and yet are compelled. So on one hand we have freedom, and on the other hand we are compelled and driven. So where we have free will and we have freedom and we could have acted in any way, we are somehow compelled. Compelled here is about reaction. We act without knowing what we're doing, without having contemplated what we're doing, without having deliberated the effect it's going to have upon another. When we enter into an argument or a disagreement, or we end up of criticizing or judging someone, we often do not look at the consequence that is going to have upon the other. We only think of our own righteousness. We only think of our own side and why what we think is correct. But your thinking is in fact the problem. your righteousness, your indignation, your feeling that you know is the problem. Why is it the problem? Because it is causing you to feel yourself superior to the other and therefore judge them. And in judging them, you have made yourself the God who you either worship or despise, right? But you have made yourself in the image of that which you created, because God is not judgmental, but people have created God in their own image as judgmental. Isn't that weird? Yes. So, um, we act freely and yet are compelled. Compelled by what? Compelled by our ego. Our ego reacts. Our ego feels compelled to say things. You say, oh, I'm compelled to say the truth. No, you're not compelled to say the truth. You're not looking at the truth. You do not know the truth. You will never know the truth. The truth is that you're thinking in this moment is an entirely subjective thing. You see the truth one way, I see the truth one way, another person sees the truth another way. The truth is not objective. Even the objects you look at of this world, you say they are real, but in fact they're not. Put them under an electron microscope and you will see that they're not. So they are and they are not. The truth you think is real is and it is not at the same time. The moment you don't have space for the is not, you have become its victim. You have become overpowered by it. You have become taken over. Your mind is no longer free. Your mind is no longer able to see the other side, the other possibilities, because you have latched into one possibility. See? Both tremblings come from God, but you feel guilty for the one. And what about the other? So the one part, which is this trembling hand, and then the hand that hits it and tries to shut it down, the one who has maybe made a mistake and the one who causes the judgment of that person. What about that one? Do you think that was so correct? There was a saying I'd come across one long back: wrongdoer, fault finder, one and the same. Wrongdoer, fault finder, one and the same. There is no difference between the wrongdoer and the fault finder. They are in the same category. Because to find fault in itself is the fault. Fault because now that has taken away compassion from you, that has taken away kindness, that has taken away love, that has robbed you of objectivity, that has robbed you from empathy, that has robbed you from all humanity. And now you have come to a place of judgment of another, right? Or of yourself. You want to love yourself, but you judge yourself. How can that be possible? These two cannot go together. Rumi continues, both tremblings come from God, but you feel guilty for the one. But what about the other? These are intellectual questions. The spirit approaches the matter differently. You see, the intellect sees this distinction between right and wrong, but the spirit approaches the matter differently. Omar once had a friend, a scientist, Bul Hakam, who was flawless at solving empirical problems, but could not follow Omar into the area of illumination and wonder. See, those who are very caught up with their intellect and their ability to think and their knowledge of things, they have great difficulty in understanding the wisdom that arises from illumination and wonder. Illumination and wonder, what is he talking about? Why is this important? Isn't intellect what matters? Isn't intelligence what matters? Isn't knowledge what matters? Aren't we in an age of knowledge and of information? And Rumi says no. There was a man who was flawless at solving empirical problems, but he could not follow Omar into the area of illumination and wonder. A child understands wonder because wonder is illumination. Suddenly, when you wonder, whatever you wonder, whatever you're curious about, be that a thought, be that an object, a flower, a tree, a butterfly, or a bug, it's all wondrous. And when you lose, and when there is wonder, that thing lights up. That thing becomes illuminated. Now suddenly you are fascinated by it. And suddenly it holds a mystical power over you. The same could happen with a person who you're looking at or listening to. The same can happen with a thought, with something you're reading, like the poetry of Rumi. The same can happen when you look into the eyes of your beloved. Illumination and wonder. The moment there is wonder, there is curiosity, there is openness, there is an openness of the heart, an openness of the mind, an opening of the senses. And when that happens, there is illumination. It's just like when you open the lens of a camera, then suddenly the light is let in more. So suddenly, as you open your own senses, you open your ears to listen more carefully and more intently to another being. You open your eyes to really gaze deeply upon a sunset or anything that is around you. You open your mind to be able to contemplate something of great wisdom. Then what happens is there is illumination that occurs. There is what some have called an aha moment. Illumination has occurred, right? You feel something has lifted you up from the mundaneness of life just by looking more intently, more deeply at something. Now I return to the text, Rumi says, and he is with you wherever you are. But when have I ever left it? And he refers to God. He is with you wherever you are. They say God is with you wherever you are. And people might doubt that. They may say God is in heaven. God is somewhere else. Yes, so untrue. God is in every atom of the creation. When you look at that with wonderment and with amazement and with fascination, there is illumination because you are in fact looking at God. You are actually looking. That is what it means to be in the present moment. The present moment is not about just being here now. That's just the beginning of it. But really diving into it, right? Really looking, all your mind, your heart, all your senses. You look at something. You look into the eyes of your beloved. You touch someone. You experience a flower or a tree or something, nature, or your own body or your own self, or you deeply listen to someone or something, what you will find is the presence of God there. That is the illumination. That is what is getting illuminated, because you're experiencing something divine. That something divine is uplifting you. So now he goes on to say in the text, perhaps he refers to the Quran, perhaps he refers to the Bible, I don't know. He says, and he quotes, and he is with you wherever you are. God is with you wherever you are. And to which Rumi says, but when have I ever left you, God? When have I ever left? I have always been with you, and you have always been with me. You see, this is the union. This is actually what yoga is about, is this union, this oneness. I have always been with you and you have always been with me. We are one. Christ also said the same thing. He said, I and the Father are one. That oneness is possible for all of us. It is not just reserved for one person. We can all be one. But what does that oneness come from? It comes from this state of wonder and illumination. Ignorance, Rumi continues, ignorance is God's prison. Knowing is God's palace. Now, he's not talking about ignorance as in education, as in knowledge. Ignorance is to ignore that which is, to ignore reality, to not see things as they are, not see things as you think they are, not see things as you would like them to be, but to see things as they are. That is what he's referring to. That is real awareness. So ignorance, right, is God's prison. Knowing is God's palace. Knowing means an acceptance. It's not about an intellectual knowing. It is a knowing means a communing, a oneness with. Knowing, I know you. I have this feeling of knowing when I am with you. I feel you, I sense you, I get you. That kind of knowing, right? It's a communing, it's a connecting with something. And in that, he says, is God's palace. There you, because you will know a thing by its symptoms, not just by some theories, but by its symptoms. What is the symptom of this oneness? What is the symptom of this communion? What is the symptom of this deep knowing that you have entered God's palace, that you have entered the kingdom of heaven? Right here, right now. You are in that paradise right now. Because you will feel yourself uplifted. You will feel and experience yourself in another dimension altogether. What did you do? You did what every child does, what you were born doing, right? Which is wonder. We sleep in God's unconsciousness. We wake in God's open hand. We sleep in God's unconsciousness. When we sleep, that is to say, when are we sleepwalking? When are we sleeping? It's not about the physical sleep here. We sleep when we are not aware, we are not conscious, we are not present to life and what is happening. What does being present to life mean? It doesn't mean that I'm just looking at it and I'm here now. It means that I'm really fascinated by all that is going on. I'm really I'm flowing with. Think of a surfer who is surfing the waves, right? So you're surfing with life. You're not resisting life. You're not resisting what is happening, what someone is saying, what someone is doing. You don't sit around blaming and accusing people. You don't say, he said this and she said that, and oh my God, how could they do that? No, that's resisting life, right? Or it's such a rainy day today, or it's snowing so much today. Oh my God, it's so hot today. You're resisting life, right? In any one of these things, I lost my job. There's a traffic on the freeway. There's so many people in the line. You're resisting life. To surf life, to be able to ride the waves of life, that is what it means to be conscious. So as long as we are resisting life, we're sleeping and having a nightmare. Life becomes a nightmare and we suffer. We sleep in God's unconsciousness. We wake in God's open hand. Open hand is really where we have our freedom. Freedom to choose the experience we want to have. What is the experience you'd like to have of life? Is the experience one of being unconscious and asleep? Or is it one of being conscious and awake? And if it is to be conscious and awake, then stop resisting life as it is unfolding in front of you. Because it is unfolding in front of you, and there is not a whole lot you can do about it. You cannot control it. You cannot change it. It is happening the way it's happening. And as long as you're trying to resist that, it's going to cause you pain. So stop. Wake up in God's open hand, which means wake up and watch what's actually happening. You cannot control anything. I remember this one lovely person I met, and she said to me once, she's talking about how she likes to go out dancing in the middle of the night, and about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and her husband would be sleeping. He has work the next day. And I said, doesn't it bother him? Doesn't he worry that you might be dancing with some strangers or guys or having an affair or something? He said, we trust each other, and I would do nothing to break the trust, and he knows that. I have taught him how to be able that if he tries to hold me like this, I will run away. But if he holds me like this with freedom, I will always be there. So this is also God's open hand. We wake in God's open hand. when we recognize that we have been given this incredible gift of freedom and choice, we learn to exercise it. On one hand, we learn to be able to experience life as it is. On the other hand, we learn to make choices that I can choose to resist life or not resist it. I can flow with the current of life. And I can become one with life. We weep God's rain. We laugh God's lightning. See, this is what it feels like. When the rain falls, we weep, meaning we empathize, we flow with it. We laugh God's lightning, right? We crack up. Fighting and peacefulness both takes place within God. See, whether you resist life or whether you flow with life, you're still with God. You are loved no matter what. You are in that place of God no matter what. The only difference is, are you conscious or unconscious? Are you asleep or are you awake? That's really it. Are you in your sleep? Are you having a nightmare? And in your waking, are you having an experience of paradise? Rumi continues, who are we then in this complicated world tangle that is really just the single straight line down at the beginning of Allah? Who are we then in this complicated world tangle? That is really just the single straight line down at the beginning of Allah. Nothing. He answers the question, who are we then? Right? I'm not sure how it is written in Arabic, because that's what he would be looking at, Allah. So I'm not able to answer that part. But who are we in this complicated world tangle? Who are we? And the question has been asked by many, many spiritual teachers all across the ages. Who am I? Who am I? And as you contemplate that, and as you peel the layers of who am I, peel off the layers of identity that you think of yourself as this body, as male or female, as American or Indian or Chinese or whatever else you might identify with your nationality. And as you peel off the layers of religion and layers of your age and of your youth and or old age or whatever, wherever you're at, as you peel off the layers of your education and your job and your work, as you peel it all off and you keep saying, well, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? At a deeper and deeper and deeper level, you finally find something. You come to the real thing. You come to the true reality of who you are. And Rumi answers it like this: nothing. You are nothing. And he says, we are emptiness. What does it mean to be nothing? What does it mean to be emptiness? To be nothing is, I think the way to look at it is an empty cup with nothing in it. A vacuum. A empty space. A blank canvas. And a blank page. Right? And when you have a blank page or a blank canvas, what is the invitation? To create something. What is it that happens in a vacuum? Nature abhors a vacuum, and so something comes rushing in. But what if you become fully aware that my nature is emptiness, and therefore I need to keep emptying myself? Whatever I think, whatever I believe, whatever I know, whatever I am, whatever I identify with, whatever I have, empty myself. I'm constantly emptying myself. Because as I keep emptying myself, life will start to flow through me. Life will start to happen in ways that I could never have imagined. Life will not be something I planned from point A to point B. It is not about my goals and it is not about my destination, because all goals shall be lost. All goals are futility. All goals are an endless rat race into oblivion. Do not chase these stupid things. Do not chase the manufactured creations of your mind that will lead you nowhere. Rather, recognize the emptiness that you are, the nothingness that you are. Why? Because into nothingness comes everything. You will be blessed. Blessed by the presence of the divine, blessed by the presence of God. You will find yourself carried, held, protected in every way. You will find yourself enlightened. You will find yourself awakened. You will find yourself uplifted. You will experience what some have called heaven on earth. You will know it here and now. There will be no need to go anywhere. Because in fact, in that nothingness is everything. So experience it, my friends. It's not something that I can or that can be understood just by words. It must be acted upon. What does it mean to act upon it? It means that every time a thought comes, let it go. It's not true. Recognize that whatever your mind tells you is not true. Nothing is true. What is true is the emptiness. Embrace that. And everything else that appears to be true, let it go. Because in fact, that's the illusion. When you sit with the truth that I am nothing, I am nothing, I am nothing, that's devastation for the ego. The ego is, oh my God, I am nothing. Wait a minute, I have to be something. I have to be significant. I have to be worthy. I have to be good enough. I have to be important. No. We got it all wrong. That's the ego's path. And that is what is leading us on this treadmill of destruction and devastation. Let the ego go. Let it know I am nothing. But you cannot do that without humility, without bowing your head into a place of surrender into the divine and saying, I am nothing, you are everything. Into really embracing that truth of life. I am an insignificant speck in the universe. I am not even as big as a grain of sand is on a beach. I am tinier than even that. I am insignificant in every way. Into that humility shall come the blessings of all that you have ever desired. If you desired happiness, happiness will come there. Into that will come peace. Into that will come love. Into that will come all the joys that you've ever wanted. All your desires will be fulfilled in nothingness, in embracing the truth. How, you say? How is that possible? Because what then comes into you, what fills your cup now, is not the stuff of the world, which in any case was never able to satisfy you, but rather is the energy of the divine in its purest form begins to come into you. God comes into you. God fills you. And when you are filled in that way, you feel for the first time nurtured, satisfied, fulfilled, and in every way at home. Try it, my friends. And let's keep talking. If you have any further questions, please connect with me. I'm on Instagram at rohitjuneja.us, and on YouTube, you'll find me there, Rohit Juneja, and you'll find me on Facebook as well, or my website, rohitjuneja.com. I'd love to connect further with you and talk about these things as much as you like. I'm here for you. Lots of love. Take care.